asked for it. The play-by-play, step-by-step, the official how-to video for converting a brand new Kawasaki Ninja ZX14R shock to fit into your third generation Honda VFR750. So this video is going to cover all the model years from 1990 to 1993 VFR750. So if you've got a 90, 91, 92, or 93, any of them 4 years, this video is for you. And for the Ninja shock, that's going to cover all the years from 06 to 2015, which I believe is the lifespan of the big Ninja. So all those years you can exchange, and there's no shortage of them online. That's another reason why this is just such a fantastic swap, is because, you know, with 9 or 10 years lifespan that the big Ninja's been around, there's just no shortage of people who are customizing them. And especially, that's one of them bikes there where everybody that has one wants to customize it. They stretch them and they put aftermarket rims on them, aftermarket suspensions. So just you know, just a lot of good deals out there. So let's get into this. That's the reason why you guys are here, is to see how this deal works, right? Now, if you haven't already noticed, this is not a Ninja ZX14R shock, though. Doesn't matter. I'll get into that in a second. This is, however, a third generation VFR shock. Okay, so this is the shock that I took out of my 1990. All right, so that's the actual third gen VFR shock there. The reason why I have this shock here, and this is a brand new Yamaha R6 shock, okay? The reason why I'm using this is only for demonstration purposes, because the only other ZX14R shock I have is in the bike, and I'm not taking it out just to do this video. It doesn't matter though, you don't need to actually see the shock. You can go with this one. And the reason why I chose this R6 for the demonstration is because it has the same dimensions on the lower mount and the upper mount. Okay, so if I were to want to put this into a third gen VFR, I would be making the same exact modifications to the upper and lower mounts as I've made to the ZX14R. So, man, wait till you guys see how easy this is. There's really nothing to it. A couple things you want to have. Now, there's other ways you could do this, but I'm just going to show you how I did it. You want to have a micrometer. If you don't already have a micrometer, it's a really useful tool. It's one of them tools where you don't know you need one. You know, until you buy it. You wind up picking one up for one simple job. Like maybe if you don't have a micrometer, you buy one particularly for this swap. Okay, because I said you need one, so you go out and buy one. Well, it's one of them tools where once you have it, you'll find yourself starting to use it for everything. So if you don't already have one, go ahead and get you one. It's worth it. If you don't have one and you don't want to buy one, it's fine. You could use anything as a gauge. Remember, all this is a gauge. You could use a piece of tape. You could use a marker on a piece of you know, steel, or a ruler. You know, there's no reason why you couldn't use a ruler. But the reason why we're using this, or any other kind of gauge, is because you want to know what the inside diameter is of the shock mount here. Okay, so as you can see, this one is about 30 millimeters. Okay, now the original VFR shock is 32 millimeters. Okay, so what's that mean? That means you need to remove 1 millimeter from each side of this shock mount down here. Okay, very simple. I'm going to show you how to do it by hand. Alright, and just to show you how big 1 millimeter is, okay, when I make videos like this, guys, it's always geared towards somebody who's brand new or somebody who's never done something like this before. So some of you guys who are, you know, accomplished fabricators, this might be a little bit boring for you. You're just looking for the, you know, the specifics. But the reason why I show everything like this is because I'm always thinking about that person who's never done anything like this before. So if you have a lot more experience, just bear with me here. So that's 1 millimeter. I'm going to give you guys a really good shot of this. Okay, so see, I've got the micrometer zeroed in at 1 millimeter. Not zeroed in, but I've got it set with a 1 millimeter opening. So I want to give you guys a really good close-up of this. Okay, so that's all you're removing right there. Okay, and you want to remove 1 millimeter from each side of the shock mount. That's it. Now there's a few different ways you could do this. Let me just throw this out there to you. The easiest way to do this is if you've got access to a lathe or other machining tools. It's very, very simple. If you've got some high-end especially nowadays, something computer assisted. Okay, now if you don't have a lathe, which I can imagine a lot of you guys probably don't, then you can also use a Dremel. Okay, so here's a Dremel, and if you use a Dremel, now I didn't do any of this, but I'm just showing you ways you can do it. If you use a Dremel, you want to use a sanding disc, or a sanding drum, I'm sorry. You probably use a sanding disc too, but I think the drum has more bite to it. Alright, you don't want to use the grinding stone. Alright, the grinding stone attachment will work also, but it's just not made for this. The sanding cylinder, one, you know, just like this. Now you could use a different grit. This is a harder grit, and this one is on here because I made some setup bearings not that long ago, so I had to grind out the bearing races, and that's what I used this one for. That's why it's still on there. So it's got a coarse grit, but you can use a finer grit. But the bottom line is, using these sanding cylinders works beautiful for stuff like this, because it only takes out a little bit at a time, and you can really clearly see exactly how much you're taking out, and you're not going to get a big gouge. Okay, so if you make a mistake and you tap this or you tap that or you tap this, and it's going to happen. Let me tell you something. I don't care how steady your hand is, you're going to wind up, you know, bumping into this or bumping into that. Nothing's going to happen. You're not going to take a big chunk out of it or anything like that. So that's why these are great. And it'll take you about maybe 10 minutes, okay? So, you know, maybe a little bit longer, okay? It all depends on what kind of grit cylinder you're using and how fast you're going. But I would just figure on anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to be able to fully take out 1 millimeter from each side. Okay, now that's if you use this. Now, there's another thing you could use, that, and this is all stuff that you guys might have in your shop. That's why I'm showing you this. So let me just take out my camera here. If I can figure out how to do it. Alright, I had to figure out how to get my camera off of the pod there. So another thing you could do is, if you guys have a bench grinder, like this one here, this is just a little 6-inch guy. I think an 8-inch or a 10-inch grinder would be even better, but it's just giving an example. Even with a 6-inch grinder, you can make it happen. What you can do is turn that baby on, and then just take this just like this. Just go side to side with it. Now this way is going to take you a little bit longer because it grinds fast. Let me put this down here. The way the grinding wheel works is it grinds really fast in, you know, anything that you're grinding on the face of it. When you grind on the side, it just takes longer. Okay, so you can grind out metal pretty quickly going into it this way, but on the side you could still do it. It takes longer mainly because you have to really focus the whole time. You know, you don't want to be cockeyed. You don't want to be grinding this way. You don't want to be grinding that way. You want to make sure that that's perfectly straight. All right, now it's not rocket science, guys. I mean, you know, anybody who's intimidated by this, you don't have to be. It really is not that big of a deal. Just take your time. Use your, use your eyes. Watch what you're doing. Be careful, but it's not that big of a deal. And another good thing about this is you also don't have to worry about taking too much material off, because it takes a while to grind. This is going to take you at least a good bit of 20 minutes to get both sides done, maybe up to a half hour. So that's if you're taking your time. You know, you don't want to take a chance in gouging anything. This will gouge stuff, so you need to be careful, because if you were to tap into it this way, or, you know, when you go to pull it away, if you're not paying attention, your kids are coming, your wife is calling you, the dog's running up, whatever, and you know, you go and you bump into it with your spring or something, it's going to gouge it. Okay, if you bump into it from this side, this grinder is going to gouge your spring. It's going to gouge the mount. So when you're doing this, you need to be 100% focused. Okay, put your earplugs in. You know, tell the wife and kids not to bother you for a half hour, or do it at nighttime like I usually do when everybody goes to sleep. All right, but that's all you got to do. Pretty simple, side to side. And one thing is, you're going to want to use a good wheel. Use a brand new wheel. Okay, so this wheel is really worn. I use it all the time for all kind of stuff. And as you can see, it's got a good bit worn out. When this wheel is brand new, the wheel almost touches this metal plate here. Okay, so that's how much this is worn. That, you know, that full gap there. So if you're going to use a grinder, you want to make sure that you put a brand new wheel on there, because you want the most surfaced area to give you the cleanest cut. Alright, so that's an option. And let's go back over here. Hook this back up. Before I get into the top mount, let me show you one other way, because you might say, hey, you know, I don't have a bench grinder, I don't have machining tools, I don't even have a Dremel. Well, guess what? You know how I did my ZX14 shock? just to prove it could be done, baby. I used the hand file, old school. All right, and yeah, it took a long, whoop. It took a long time. You see that? That shock was scared. That was fear you just saw. That shock saw this file and it wanted to jump off the table. Anyway, yeah, this is the longest way. If you're going to use a hand file, it's going to take you a good bit of time, but it can be done. Not only can it be done, but that is exactly how I did the one on my ZX14. Why would I do that if I've got the Dremel, I've got the bench grinder, and I do have access to machining tools? I've got more than a couple friends who have machine shops, so I could have very easily ran over to their place and, 10 minutes had it done. And the reason why I did this, just to show you guys out there that you could do it. Okay, so anybody out there, if you don't have all that stuff, don't feel like you can't get this done. I'm telling you right now, the only expense that I paid in swapping that shock in was the cost of the shock itself. Alright, I was able to do all my modifications with the stuff I already had. Alright, and if you don't already have a good file, you really should have one. It's kind of like the micrometer thing. If you don't already have one, spend a couple bucks because it's a great tool. Maybe some of you guys watching this are young bucks and you just haven't even started buying tools yet. Here's a good place to start. Now this is a Nicholson, one of my favorite brands, made in the USA. Just a really strong, no bullshit, good file. And this one's got the double cross cut on one side. This side's normal, this side's got the double cut. So this one cuts on the forward and the reverse. So this, believe it or not, this file removes material really fast. Okay, for a hand file, you'd be surprised how fast I could file something like this down. Alright, but take your time if you've never done that before. Alright, and just take that baby and just go back and forth just like that. Okay, now I'm just demonstrating to you. I'm actually cutting into it. You see that? Like I said, you get you a good file and it works pretty quick. Okay, but I don't want to get too crazy with this because I'm just demonstrating it. Again, I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to modify this shock yet, so I don't want to get too much into stuff like this. But just for the demonstration on this video, matter of fact, let me zoom it in for you. I want you guys to really get this. I mean, it's so simple. Okay, just like that. Now let me just show you how fast this works. If you can see, I hope this shows up on the video, look at all these metal filings already. Not sure how clear this is showing up, but you guys can see all those sparkly bits. I mean, that's quite a bit of material already. Look at all that. I'm not even really putting any effort into it. So again, with a good hand file, you'd be surprised. That's all you really need. Not only can you do it, but I have done it with this. So look at the shock end. Look at that. See how much came off already? See how fast that works? And another thing I like about doing it by hand is it's really easy to see that you're staying flat. Keep checking it. Take a little bit out, check it. Take a little bit out, check it. You'll get the hang of it. If you've never done anything like this before, after 10 minutes you're going to be a pro. Half you guys are probably looking at it and going, what? That's it? This is what we've been waiting for? But yeah, I told you from the first video that it was simple modifications. Now, one last thing I want to say about this is even if you do use a grinder, or a Dremel or anything like that, you're still going to want to go over it with a hand file anyway when you're done, just because you're going to get little burrs in the metal. And one thing I like to do is after you're done, usually you're going to have one side that's kind of sharp. Even now, after that little bit of filing, I can feel it. See if you guys could see here, but you get like a little sharp edge to it. So what I like to do is I bevel everything. That keeps it smooth, takes out any rough edges, so it's just more pleasant to handle. You don't get any kind of metal splinters gumming up your needle bearings or anything like that. And in case you tuck your hand in there to do something, you want to minimize all that sharp stuff. Also, I think it just looks professional. When you bevel the edge like that, that's just me. You put a nice little bevel on that edge and and that's something special. That looks like somebody knew what they were doing, you know. So, you know, even if you don't know what you're doing like me, little things like that make you look like a champ. Okay, so I mean, here's another thing. I didn't mention this before. If you don't have a micrometer, you could just keep grinding a little bit, keep grinding a little bit, and then keep test fitting it until you finally got to the, you know, where it fits. Said use your own mind up. You guys are grown-ups. There's a lot of ways you could do this. Just showing you one, maybe 2 or 3 ways here. Alright, the top mount. Pretty much the same thing. This video is almost done. Hang in there, guys, but it's a wrap right now. The top mount's pretty much the same thing. Taking it from the top here. Same procedure. Alright, you want to use your micrometer. And I think I need to say micrometer about 20 more times just to be able to get it. Micrometer. Alright. So, use your fancy electric digital measuring device. And see what the factory one is, which is 28.3. Okay. Lock that in and show you. Okay. So we got 28.3. Alright, so that's the width of the collar that the bolt goes through to connect to the upper mount. Alright, so that's what we're measuring. Just to be clear, alright, I'm not measuring this part. You see that? That's not going to do us any good. We need a measurement on the collar because the collar is wider than the housing. It sticks out a little bit further because your frame on your bike, the attachment point connects to the collar, not to the housing part. So that's the measurement that you need to work with. So what I do is I just take the micrometer and put it like that. So that's what we're looking to get. Now let's see what this R6 mount measures out to. It's bigger. Now, not as big of a difference as the bottom. The top mount on that one is 29.9. Alright, so the good news is there's quite a bit of collar protruding for us to grind away, and we only need a little bit because we're going from 29.9 to 28.3. So in this case up here, we don't need 2 millimeters, we only need about 1.5 millimeters. Alright, that's it. So we're taking approximately 0.75 or 3/4 of 1 millimeter off of each side of this collar. So we're going to take off 3/4 of a millimeter here, 3/4 of a millimeter there. Done deal. And just to show you a comparison again, as you can see, the collar on the factory 3rd gen shock doesn't protrude as much. You see that? You can barely even see it. You can feel it and you can measure it with the micrometer, but you can't even really see it. It looks like it's flush. It's not though. Alright, so that's the difference. On these newer shocks, that collar protrudes quite a bit. You can see it's really easy to see there. So this is all good though. So keep in mind, this is exactly what you want. You want this end to be a little bit tighter because that allows us to make this simple modification very easily. Take 1 millimeter off each side, done deal. And you want this to be bigger so that you can just grind it a little bit and get it down to where it needs to be. So those are all, I mean, it's a phenomenal thing and it's functioning the way it's intended to function. That's the most important thing. Trying to think if I missed anything before I wrap this video up. The most important thing is to continually keep rechecking while you're doing this, alright? Because as soon as you get to where you need to be, you need to stop. You don't want to go too far, and you also want to make sure both sides are as even as possible. And it's kind of dark, so you can't really see anything right now, but there it is. This baby's ready to go.